is Christina. I want to welcome you to my channel, Horror, History, and Haunting, where in this video in particular, I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to present you with all the evidence I can find about that story, and then I will let you be the judge of whether it's pure fact, pure fiction, or somewhere in between. So, okay, let's just jump into the story. Just for a moment, let's suspend all preconceived notions and beliefs. Imagine that you're in Tokyo on a warm, balmy, sunny day, and you're there for business. In this trip, you've taken a couple times, so it's nothing new. You've basically formed the same routine you've done, 2 or 3 times before. You wake up in your hotel room, take a shower, put your suit on, go to your scheduled meeting, go back to the hotel to gather all your belongings for the flight home, and then take a taxi to the airport. When you arrive at the airport, you do what you've always done. You get in line to go through airport security. It is following your turn at the kiosk with the little window. If you've been to the airport, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The person behind the counter asks you for your passport, and they start the regular round of questions. Where are you from? Why were you in Tokyo? Where are you going? And why are you going there? You hand over your passport. You give the same answers you've given twice before, which was your home country, that you were there for business, and you're headed back home now that the business is concluded. And that's when the normal routine stops. The person behind the counter explains that they must have misheard you. Could you please repeat what you just said? Of course, you're a little frustrated, so you sigh a little bit. You give them the same information, the name of your home country, that you're in Tokyo for business, and now that you're done, you want to go home. The person just stands there looking at you, looking at your passport, and looking back up at you. And then finally speaks up and states that they've never heard the country that you're talking about. What do you mean you've never heard of my country? It's been around for like 1,000 years. Hold on a moment, they respond. They walk over to their supervisor in the corner and they start whispering, and then they're looking at the passport and they're whispering and they're pointing in your direction. The supervisor looks at you and he looks over at the passport and he starts scratching his head like he's confused, and then you see him talking on the walkie-talkie, and then he yells over, "Where did you say you're from again?" And again, you're like, oh jeez, how many times I gotta say this? You tell him your home country. While this exchange is happening, there's 2 airport security guards that walk up to the booth. Now, the supervisor states that he, too, has never heard of this country, and there must be some sort of misunderstanding, and asks you to come with them. Now, what are you supposed to do? You go with them, right? And they take all your belongings, and then they take you into this little interview room. I don't know. Hopefully you've never had to do this. I never have. But they take you into this little interview room. They question you again and again about your home country and what city did you get your passport, and you tell them, and then they're looking at your passport again, and you're like, I don't get it. Like, my passport was done in the national capital of my country, my home country. Everybody knows my country. They should know the capital. Now, so then they're like, well, can we see your driver's license or anything else that you have with you to prove what country you're from? This is all weird, but of course you hand them your driver's license, and then you think, hey, I've got my checkbook. It has my address. It shows that I'm from my home country. The city that I live in is the capital of that country. And it shows the address of the bank that's in the city. The 2 security guards are looking over your documents, then you, and then each other, and everybody is obviously confused. They explain that they're going to be back in a minute, and then leave you again alone in the interview room. Now, at this point, if it was me, I would be kind of freaking out. I'm like, this is crazy. Like, everybody knows where I'm from. That's like saying, nobody's ever heard of the United States or Washington, D.C. for me. That would be insane. And you've made this trip a couple times now with no issues. What's the difference between this time compared to other times? So the security officials and the supervisor, they come back in the room, and they have a map that they got from, of course, the travel kiosk or something out, in the airport. and they ask you to please point out the country that you're from. So you look at the map, you find your country, and then you pause. You found your country, but it was labeled as something else. I don't understand. There has to be a mistake. This is my country, but it's certainly not called that. Now at this point, everyone's at a loss on what to do. So they decide to take you to the airport security and explain that you'll have to stay under guard until the matter's cleared up. Because obviously there's something here. So, you know, they have to call in like their federal agencies to come in and see if they can sort it out. They're at their, you know, there's nothing more they can do. Like, you're frustrated, they're frustrated. So they're just like, you know, we're going to put you in the hotel. We'll see, you know, if we can sort it out in the morning. So they take all your documents, they take all your personal belongings, and then they leave you in this hotel room. Now, the next thing you know is the federal authorities come in, and they look over your documents, ask you again about your home country at the hotel, and of course, they've never heard of this country either. So you get tired, you're frustrated, and you find yourself in a situation, and basically you have no choice but settle in for the night, because there's no resolution. You know where you're from, but obviously nobody else knows what you're talking about, which is insane. Okay? Now, this is when the story gets even more weirder. Because the next morning, the federal authorities arrive to interview you again, but to their surprise, you're gone. You're just vanished. And now, what's weird is the hotel room that they put you in, because, you know, they have to keep you under guard. So there's a security guard outside at all times. And then on top of that, there's no balcony. There's no way for you to have got out a window. All you've got basically is a hotel room and a bathroom. And there's no way you could have got out that window to leave. You didn't go out past the security guard. So where did you go? Now the federal authorities at that point, they decide, well, we got to find this guy. And the only information we got is his belongings and his paperwork. So they go back to the evidence locker to retrieve all this stuff. And lo and behold, all that's vanished too. Under lock and key and guard, it's gone. This whole story sounds crazy, right? But what's even crazier is that some people actually think this happened to a man in July of 1952. Now, they dubbed him as the Man of Torrid. So you may have heard this story before because it's been all over the internet. Now, the specific man, he was described as a Caucasian, smartly dressed man in a suit with a beard. Now, he was able to speak multiple languages, but his home language was French, and he had multiple types of currency on him from what he said was his earlier travels in Europe. According to this man, this was not his first trip to Tokyo for business, and the passport stamps supposedly confirmed this, and supposedly it was his third trip to Tokyo. There were also various other countries stamped in his passport as well. The place he came to be from was called Taured, T-A-U-R-E-D, and the city that all his documents were from was from that country's capital. So when the investigators checked into the mysterious man, believe it or not, things get even weirder. The company that he said he worked for and the company that he supposedly met with earlier that day in Tokyo said they never heard of the man, and then they checked with a hotel that he said he was staying at during his visit, and they've never had a reservation under the man's name. So that's weird. And supposedly the reservation was made by the company at the hotel. So, you know, so who was this man from Taured? Now, when he vanished from the hotel, were the authorities possibly behind his disappearance and all the evidence of the man vanishing? Or did he simply just go back to where he came from? Could this be an imaginative urban legend? A story that's been told that just got blown out of proportion and it became a supernatural story on the internet. But let's look at the evidence. Now, Upon researching the Man of Torrid, I discovered that the story took place supposedly in 1952, but there's no evidence of this happening in any journals or newspapers at the time. And, you know, you got to think this was before cell phones and the internet and all that. So if something like this happened, you would think it would have been in some sort of newspaper or a journal at that time, because that's how people got their news and how people found out about things that happened. The first time the story is ever really told isn't until it shows up in a book called The Directory of Possibilities. And the book was written by Colin Wilson, and it was an anthology of supernatural short stories. And that was in 1981. And nobody can really trace where he got the information for the story. And it seems after that publication, the story was just retold over and over after that, and especially after the internet. You know, people just kept telling the story over and over. There are two historical references that can be found about something that was similar to the story of Man of Torrid. You can find it in a Japanese newspaper. They published about a man that they dubbed the Mystery Man, but that didn't come out till 1960. They state that the man was named John Allen Kochar Zagros, and he was born in the United States and had a Korean wife that was with him. The reason he was arrested, he was trying to cash fraudulent checks of 200 yen. They were traveler's checks to the Japanese office of Chase Manhattan Bank, and another traveler's check of 100,000 yen to the Japanese office of the Bank of Korea. And he was trying to use fake identification to do that. The man claimed he was a diplomat of Ethiopia. And he told this big elaborate story about how he was a spy, and like in multiple countries he was a spy, but then because he was a spy, eventually he became this big diplomat in Ethiopia, and that's why he was in Tokyo, was, you know, he was doing something to do with his diplomat status. Now, the other place that you could find a reference is in Vancouver, British Columbia, in a newspaper called The Providence. They published an article about John Allen Kochar Zagros that they called The Man with His Own Country. Now, in that, they stated that his passport was issued at Tamanrasset, I hope I said that right, the capital of Torrid, T-U-A-R-E-D, south of the Sahara. And that's how it's stated in his passport. And speculated that the name Torrid was misspelled, and it was supposed to be Tuareg, T-U-A-R-E-G, which is actually located in Algeria on the fake passport. So they made this fake passport and they didn't know how to spell it, and they misspelled it. At least that was their theory. Now, it was also reported by a man, his name was Atsuki Sasa, who was a detective for the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department Public Security Bureau. Now, he investigated the incident, and he was a very respected reporter. Now, he mentioned this man in his memoirs. So after he retired, he wrote his memoirs, and he mentioned it in there. Now, Zagros was eventually convicted in the Tokyo District Court on August 10th of 1960. So that's 8 years later than the original story stated. Now, according to that, he was sentenced to 1 year in jail. After he was sentenced, he tried to attempt suicide in the courtroom. Somehow he was able to smuggle, I guess in his mouth or on his clothing, somewhere in his hair, I don't know, a piece of glass, broken glass that he had found, into the courtroom. So whenever they sentenced him to a year, he tried to kill himself. Now, they were able to like take him down and wrestle him and get the glass away from him. He wasn't actually able to harm himself majorly like he intended, but he was sentenced to 1 year in jail. He was deported from Japan to Hong Kong. After serving his 1 year sentence, he was released. So I don't know what happened to him after he was released. But when he was, I guess during his sentencing while he was in jail, they deported his wife back to South Korea because she was evidently involved in the traveler's check fraud. So the question is this something that happened conventionally that kind of got blown up to be something supernatural? Or did the government construct a believable story in a court case to cover up that he really did come from a place that didn't exist in our reality, and then spirited him away to some secret facility somewhere? Was he just a con man trying to make a fast buck, or a man lost from another dimension in time? What do you think? I would love to hear your opinion in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, and this is a completely different format than what I've done before, if you'd like to see more of it, give it a like. I've got some more ideas of different stories that I want to do. If you're interested in horror history or hauntings, you're definitely in the right place, because that's the kind of stories that I plan on covering in the future. And finally, thank you for all your love and support and patience, because I know I kept saying that I was going to post a video, but it took a while for me to figure out how and have the equipment to do it. So I just want to thank you for all your love and support and your patience. I hope you have a wonderful, fabulous rest of your day. And thank you for making it all the way through. And I will talk to you next time. Bye-bye.